The incarceration of high-profile underworld figures like Al Capone and Mickey Duffy earned Eastern State a reputation as a home for Prohibition's biggest players. But before the rise of gangsters and speakeasies, another story was brewing within the penitentiary, one that highlights prisoners' surprising perspectives on the Prohibition era.
Alcohol played a significant role in Eastern State Penitentiary's history, beginning with its inception. Benjamin Rush, one of the founders of Eastern State, was also the father of American Temperance, the belief that alcohol presents significant social and physical dangers and should be limited or cut out entirely. He even wrote a book on the subject, titled An Inquiry into the Effects of Ardent Spirits Upon the Body and Mind. Rush's attitudes towards alcohol translated into Eastern State policy.
Upon entry at Eastern State, every prisoner was asked about their alcohol consumption. Prison records classified people by their drinking habits, and officials were careful to document any evidence linking alcohol and crime. During the 19th century, practicing temperance and achieving sobriety were goals of life at Eastern State, supported by prison officials and outside organizations. Some prisoners signed temperance pledges, a document promising to abstain from alcohol. One of the most powerful reform organizations of the late 19th century, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, made several visits to Eastern State to meet with prisoners and officials. On at least one occasion, Eastern State housed a person who voluntarily committed himself in hopes of curing his intemperance.
By the turn of the 20th century, the temperance movement had become the largest social movement of its time, spanning every continent, race, gender, and social class. Supporters of the movement influenced legislation in several states, including Pennsylvania. Within the walls of Eastern State Penitentiary, an unlikely group of temperance supporters prepared to make their own case for prohibition.
In January of 1914, Eastern State's prisoner magazine, The Umpire, published a short article from its editor. The author, a self-described victim of the saloon, wrote, "Let us add our little weight to the temperance cause as a selfish precautionary measure. Let us burn our bridges and cut off at least one of the causes leading to crime." The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of others incarcerated at Eastern State wrote to the magazine, sharing their own stories and expressing a desire to aid in the prohibition cause however they could. One female prisoner wrote, "I was 30 years old when I took my first drink. That first drink was my downfall. My husband left me. My child died through neglect. Then I found my way here. By all means, pass a law making it impossible for anybody to buy liquor."
Over the next 6 months, prisoners at Eastern State organized a petition to the Pennsylvania legislature asking for a ban on alcohol sales. The petition's opening paragraphs stated that 70% of crime in the state was linked to alcohol. The authors explained that many of those who signed had experienced alcohol's negative effects in their own lives. They called for any law that would reduce the sale of liquor, believing it would significantly lower crime in Pennsylvania. Some prison officials dismissed the petition as a non-starter, unconvinced it would receive widespread support among Eastern State's population. One prison official went on record saying it would be impossible to receive 500 signatures. Others were more optimistic, as letters continued to flow to the umpire expressing support for the cause.
Signed on July 4, 1914, the petition of inmates of the Eastern Penitentiary on the sale of intoxicating liquors received over 1,000 signatures, representing nearly 70% of the prison's population. A wide range of people signed the document, including immigrants, people of color, and nearly every woman incarcerated at Eastern State at that time. Some signed with their names, others with just their prisoner number.
The petition made headlines in newspapers throughout the region. The Philadelphia North American called it the strongest sociological argument ever made in favor of prohibition. One can hardly imagine a more weighty indictment against the liquor traffic than this petition, wrote the Union Signal. The action of these men, declared the New York American, will put the next Pennsylvania legislature against the liquor traffic or in favor of crime. People incarcerated at other prisons were inspired by those at Eastern State Penitentiary. A poll of Oregon State prisoners found that 82% supported prohibition. In July of 1914, federal prisoners at Leavenworth declared that they would present a similar petition to the United States Congress. In October of that year, prisoners at Joliet Prison in Illinois did the same.
In March of 1915, Eastern State's petition was formally submitted to the state legislature 4 years before Pennsylvania banned the sale of alcohol. It was one of the last states in America to do so. In the end, however, prohibition did not have the impact on crime that Eastern State prisoners predicted. Instead, banning the manufacture and sale of alcohol helped create organized crime and ushered in a new era of violence movements in America. Cities like Philadelphia were hit especially hard, as corruption permeated all levels of society. After 13 years, Prohibition in the United States ended in 1933, largely recognized as one of the biggest blunders in American history.
The war on drugs, like Prohibition before it, demonstrated how law enforcement and prisons were used to enforce social policy. Just as Prohibition sought to curb alcohol consumption, the war on drugs aimed to eradicate drug use through strict criminalization. However, both movements disproportionately affected marginalized communities and led to unintended consequences, including mass incarceration. Despite the ultimate failure of Prohibition, the support it garnered from prisoners at Eastern State is striking. The 1914 petition represents a rare instance in which incarcerated people directly contributed to the historic record, a space traditionally dominated by prison and state officials.
Written 5 years before national prohibition was enacted, this petition highlights the significant role that Eastern State prisoners played in advancing the cause for prohibition in Pennsylvania. Their actions not only influenced public discourse in the state, but also inspired incarcerated people in other institutions to pen their own petitions in support of the movement.
Prohibition was intended to reduce crime, but instead, it fueled organized crime and corruption.
How might the criminalization of drugs today be having similar unintended consequences?
What lessons can we learn from history to address current social issues more effectively?